So this is our interview with Scotty from Tankcrimes. We really enjoyed getting to know him. Heck, I think we could have hung out for another hour, but he had to go to the post office. We had such a great conversation. But he has some really interesting stories and about what he had to do to keep this label going. So take it away.
I almost cried when we did Blasphemy Monikers. You'll see. Yeah, so I'm really familiar with your catalog. Just forgive me if I ask questions going back to like 2004 and stuff, because that's that era. So
Sorry, I broke this fucking thing. I'm trying my best here, guys.
all right.
Oh my God. I was doing a live stream one day
There we go.
Yeah.
and I had my phone in a like a tripod, and then as I'm talking, the whole thing went sideways. I was like, great.
Yeah, that was a great live stream. People loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did the same stupid fucking thing. I bought all I needed was a tripod to hold my phone, right?
Right.
But I bought one that needs to be charged. But it's got all these options. See, like I can do like this, but I
Oh.
don't need any of that shit. I just needed something to hold my fucking phone. And yeah,
Yeah.
I've been on like this Scotty press tour the last week. And yeah, it runs out of batteries and just drops the phone on the ground.
Oh,
Like the
wow.
one thing I needed to do is hold the phone. Like if it doesn't have a
Exactly.
charge, it doesn't even grip it. It's fucking stupid. But yeah.
I know. The mirror, another
Anyways,
fried Mexican made product, right? So, yeah.
yeah. So here it looks like I have a full charge on my tripod. So hopefully we can
Okay,
get it.
good.
And it finally stopped raining out here, so I'm outside. It's nice out.
Yeah, it looks nice. Yeah.
Where are
We
you
don't have
guys at?
to. We're
Where
in
am I talking to you guys
Baltimore.
from?
We're
Oh,
in Baltimore.
Bmore.
Our
All
weather's
right.
crappy. Yeah, right now.
Yeah.
And so is our football team. We're
And so
gonna
is our football team. Yes.
Oh, I'm not a sports fan, but I grew up outside of Detroit. So one of the reasons
Okay.
I might not be a sports fan is because the Detroit Lions never won a game. So I just watched
Yeah.
like angry grandparents, uncles, and fathers like my whole
Yeah.
childhood and was like, what are you guys getting out of this shit?
I can
And
relate. Relate.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because we got rid of our cable provider to save money last year, and the only thing that we lost was live sports. So when the Ravens got eliminated yesterday, I was like, yes, we never paid for it.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Trying to take the good
Yeah.
out of the bad.
we,
So
we've just been listening to it on the radio and going old school.
I'm so glad we didn't pay $180 a month to watch that shitty end of the season.
I
Yeah.
did we licensed a dystopia song to AEW to Darby Allen and
Okay.
I wanted to watch it live so bad, and I signed up for like three different things because I couldn't figure out how I was gonna watch it, and I like needed to see it happen live.
Right.
And then Darby just tweeted the whole video like 5 minutes after it went on the
Oh my
air, and
God.
so
Yeah.
I did not need to do all that, and
I
then
know
I had to
it's
cancel like three services.
we finally decided we were like, look, if the game looks really good, we'll go up to the bar and watch it, right? We never even did that. So yeah.
We
So
just stayed with the great commentators who go, "Oh my God, oh my God." And we're like, "Can you please tell us what's happening? We can't see
yeah,
it."
we can't see what you're
Just,
doing.
you're
Yeah.
yelling, "Oh my God," is
Yeah.
not helping. Did he get eaten by a lion? I don't know what just happened.
So you were a drummer in Sec, I think. How did you get into drumming, and do you still like step in once in a while when you're doing when a band needs help, or how's that work?
So I I got into drumming because I had the most money when we decided to form a band with four friends. I was waiting tables. So I
Okay.
had more disposable cash than like I think this is when we formed Deadfall. I think like the singer was a bar back, but so I made more than him because I worked at kind of a fancier spot in SF.
Okay.
And then I think it was like I think maybe they were students or maybe Mark worked at like Ben and Jerry's. Anyways, I was the only one who had like $350.
Okay. I can relate to
And
that.
like
Yeah.
we already so it was like everyone else already had like our guitar player knew how to play guitar. Our bass player didn't know how to play bass, but our guitar player had a bass. I didn't know
Mm,
how to play drums, but I was the only one that could afford a kit.
that's
So
right.
that's how punk bands start. So I
Exactly.
was that. And I actually now, so my wife and I moved out here. We're in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and we've been
Okay.
out here for about a year and a half since I left Oakland. And I did just build a shed, another outbuilding here where I'm going to set up musical equipment, but I
Okay.
haven't sat behind a drum kit in a really long time. And I don't consider myself a musician. And that might seem crazy because I've like played drums on 3 different continents, but
Right.
I don't even really have time. I can play drums fast. I could do what needed to be done. And I feel really fortunate for the scene I found myself a part of, and kind of that era of music where it was just like, if I could play aggressively and animated, we could rock the shit out of a house party.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard for me to listen to some of those records, especially Votesec. We were doing like 4 releases a year for 10 years. Like we have so many records. I don't even have them all. But we were kind of in that scene where it was like, oh, they want to do a split. Oh, this label wants to do it. Oh, whatever. And we were just
Yeah.
writing songs in the studio, and just shitting them out.
Yeah, I still have the Deadfall you sent me. It's one of the 7 inches colored. I really like it. It's really good.
Oh,
I can't
sweet. Yeah.
remember
I mean, I'm proud of I don't want to give the wrong idea that I'm not proud of all the music, but a lot of about punk, it's certainly like me as a band member, not as a label guy. The scene I participated in, punk's fleeting. A lot of times you have to be there.
Yeah.
Of course there's classic albums and albums that go across that span generations. And half of my label is doing reissues now. So I obviously understand that. But a lot of punk is like, what band came to your town that summer? And was that a
Yeah.
great party? It's about the feeling you get while you were there. And I think because of that energy of having to just be in the room with the band, and also I don't want to say people aren't in the moment because of their phones, because I don't believe that, but I think that for a sloppy band to get far, everyone has to be in the moment, and it's about having a good time. It's much more about the feelings that you're getting while you're watching the music
Right.
than you know putting those songs on the mixtape you're going to listen to on the bus. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Save
Yeah.
that for a band that can play and write a tune.
I mean, one thing about your label that I noticed it years ago when you were sending me stuff was it seemed like every artist that you would send me, there was a thread of humor that ran through it. Is that just your personality, or what makes that?
um
I mean, I know that Dystopia has no sense of humor. I get that, but
Well, actually, they
everybody
do. Well,
else, pretty much.
first of all, I'll do two answers. I'm a super goofy guy, and people sometimes don't understand because I like to champion how I still listen to ska and shit all the time, and I love 311 and Sublime and stuff. And some
Right. Right.
people that'll really get to them, and then I'm like, have you listened to the music I put out? Like some of it's really dark. Like I need
Yeah.
like a there and there. So, but you're right, there's bands that incorporate a lot of humor, and that's not what's important to me so much as I like an artist that takes their art very seriously, but also doesn't take themselves too seriously at
Right.
all.
I
And there's
understand.
something about that. It's a personality trait more than a form of performance or writing music or making art in general. And I think, excuse me, I think that I only work with friends on the label, and I think I'm just attracted to that personality type.
Yeah.
You know,
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So you weren't the original founder of Tankcrimes. Who was, and what was it originally called, and how did you kind of come to be at the helm?
Okay, so I am the original founder of Tankcrimes, but our very first release was put out by a guy named Bob Scammon on Controlled by Plague Records.
Okay.
And how it went down was he offered to put out our record for Deadfall, and we enthusiastically said yes, and we're absolutely thrilled. We were a new band. Nothing was cooler than going to be able to put out a 7 inch. We felt like if we had a record, then we could go on tour too. It's a big move, get a record out. And what Bob did was we recorded the record, we submitted everything. And what Bob did was he showed up at our house, the original Tankcrimes in San Francisco, and handed us all 1,000 records and said, there it is. I put out your guys' record.
Wow.
Okay, this is great. But that was his idea. Like Bob was super cool, crust punk guy. And he had like a seasonal labor, maybe even a union job. Like he did really good and didn't work all year round. So he made up a bunch of money like in a season. And then even when he dropped off the record, he was like, yeah, I'm going to go train hopping and traveling. So I wanted to make sure to drop these off. I'm really glad they showed up before I left. And we
Wow.
were like, obviously really stoked. And obviously having a free 1,000 records made it really easy for us to have a successful first tour, you know, because we just had that really, you know, I mean, 7 inches at the time sold for $3, but that was $3,000 we had in the band fund if we could just get out there and sell them, you know. But it was like, we thought we were on a record label, so we were hoping to, you know, get a review in Maximum Rock and Roll and maybe get played on a college radio show, and, you know, have maybe the record would be in some stores and stuff. Like, we didn't think it was going to be huge, but we thought some of that effort went along with being in a label. And, you know, it wasn't even like Bob, like, that's just not the idea that Bob had. Bob was like, I'm putting out records. Here's your record. I put it out. Wow. So I was kind of already the band dad, you know? And so it just kind of like fell on me, like, to figure out how to move this record, how to get people to know about it, how to market and promote it and get us out on tour. And I'd say I knew I wanted to have a record label maybe even by the time I went to bed that night. And I hadn't thought about it when I woke up that morning. But it was like everything happened, and it's like there's something that happens with it's not always with the record label, it's more with touring, but it goes like this. But it also, like, one of my last real jobs was screen printing, not t-shirts, but like fine art prints and gig posters. And then I also I grew weed for a few summers illegally, and now weed's legal and I just grow weed as a hobby. And all those things, like, if there's a problem, you can't put it off. It's like all hands on deck. Everything needs to be dealt with that day. There's no moving forward until the problem's solved. And that kind of, the first sense I got was like that morning when those records got dropped off. That was one of the first times I had the feeling. It wasn't as urgent as like maybe when there's a problem on tour and you have to make it to the next town, or if you're growing weed, like if the shit's dying, you're just like, money is on fire, you know? Same thing with screen printing, like the ink is drying and the artist needs this in 2 days, shit like that. But I really felt it that day, like, man, we can't just sit on this record. Like, we need to make a decision. And I was like, fuck it. I just made a decision. I'm going to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
And I did. And so many cool label guys, like, really, like, were so helpful and friendly to me. Jeff Robinson from 6 Weeks Records is someone I consider a mentor. Felix Havoc from Havoc Records, people I consider mentors that really just, like, I mean, it's crazy how easily you can really mentor someone. You really only need to give them 1 or 2 pieces of advice. You know, like, I feel like I have tons of mentors. You know, I always looked to like the scene elders for help, you know, and they've always been friendly and stuff. Maybe it's just my approach or whatever, but everyone's always been really helpful and friendly to me. And I try to do that for everybody else too. You know, it's just kind of like part of how I like to operate.
Can you recall, like, maybe some of the best and worst advice that you got?
Yeah.
Best advice I ever got is for the record label is that your product isn't worth shit until you sell it, because that's a huge mistake people made. And I made it early on, and especially all distributions, like on consignment, even now where I have like a really good worldwide distribution. Like, so one of the things when I first started, like, I even made that mistake when we first started talking. I was like, we had 1,000 records, so we had $3,000. It was like, no, we didn't. We had to sell 1,000 records, and that didn't happen like this. So we were getting $3 at a time. But I made that mistake early, and I see other record labels make it. It's like, the records aren't worth shit. You've already parted with the money, you know? And that's what I tell people who want to start labels too, is that, like, you have to, like, have a bunch of money, hold it in your hand, and be ready to light it on fire. Because no matter how good you think that it is, if it's not marketed and promoted properly, or it just doesn't hit the right people at the right time, you might just be stuck with it. So yeah, I had to learn that having, you know, 1,000 records isn't 1,000 sales.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And so you can't look at boxes of records and start doing the math in your head. Like, even early, when I would send stuff to early distributors on consignment, I'd be like, oh, cool, that guy owes me $500. He didn't owe me $500.
He hadn't sold 500.
He hadn't sold the records yet, you know? And so stuff like that. Once I wrapped my head around that, it made it easier, because it's for years it was until I started growing weed, which I did to pay off all the debts of the label and get ahead and kind of get a fresh start, like 15 years in. It took me a while to realize that, and I think that's really important, and it's super helpful too, for bands or labels. Your product ain't shit. It's valuable to you, as it should be, but don't. It's not worth money. It's not worth anything until someone actually hands you the money for it.
Have you? I'm sure you've had this conversation with many bands and had to explain this.
Yeah, I do. I've actually. It's more to new labels that want advice.
Okay.
Like we got handed 1,000 records. Most bands are getting handed 15 to 20% of the pressing, and that works good for the label and the band, because it's like, oh, if you want to make your money back, maybe that you spend in recording, you guys got to go play some shows now. Right, and I definitely started before bands had their own web stores and stuff. I didn't even have my own web store. I started Tankcrimes before MySpace, before PayPal, before YouTube. My first tours, we didn't have cell phones. My second tour, we had one cell phone that you could only use on emergencies. Then my third tour, I think like half of the people had cell phones. And then like a couple of years later, everybody had a supercomputer in their pocket all the time, like we do now. So.
What is your logo? I've spent hours staring at it. Is it a hood? What is it?
Oh, it's a skull. It's a skull that I drew. Okay. And I drew it. It was like, so when I took over the label, Controlled by Plague, I thought at the time, and certainly because it already said Controlled by Plague on the back of my first release, that I would keep that name as like an homage to Bob and his generosity and his cool way of doing business. And also, like, I was putting all this work into the name, but after a year or two of like putting in work, and I ended up doing four releases, I think, under that name, and I actually realized later that like Bob wasn't that stoked on it. Like, he wanted to put out more records and just give away records, and he actually did that to other bands after I kind of moved off the name. But at the time, I thought I was doing like Bob like this great honor. Like, I wanted to do that for him. And it dawned on me pretty quickly that like it wasn't it like I was putting in all this work. It should really affect me and my personality and stuff like that. And so I wanted to make it mine. And Tankcrimes doesn't mean anything. Like, I just thought those two words sounded cool together, and I mashed them together. And then like when we decided to do it, I literally I used to draw a similar skull to what the Tankcrimes is, and I used to tag it. I used to be a graffiti writer, and I would tag it, and the guy's name was the Bone Crusher, but he had a body, he had a skeleton, and he used to shake these little bones in his hand. And when it was time to come up with a logo for the label, I seriously drew like 10 skulls on a piece of paper. And then I didn't used to do the big teeth like that. And I just was like, oh, those look sick. I like that. And then I even realized later that it was, and I had no idea I was doing this, but one of my favorite bands is Screeching Weasel. And if you put the logos next to each other, I was influenced in my head, and I didn't realize it, by the Screeching Weasel logo, where his teeth are placed, where his eyes are placed, and the crook on the top of his head. And I did that completely organically and didn't even realize it for like literally like years. But then it like made sense to me right away how it happened.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah,
Back in the day,
I call
I
it the
remember.
Tankcrimes skull or the Tankcrimes face,
Yeah. Back in the day, I remember staring at your logo, and I remember like Googling, this has got to be like a Disrupt song, or it's from the some kind of demo from some Bay Area band that I'm not familiar with. That's what I thought.
No, it wasn't a throwback to anything. I fucking remember the fucking instant I was sitting on the bus. I was on the N Judah train in San Francisco by myself, and it just fucking came to me, and I just thought, man, that sounds fucking cool. Like, I really chose it because of the way it sounds. And but since we're on the topic, like, what Tankcrimes is, the words up open for interpretation is what else I like it. Like, anybody can make it anything. I've had people ask me before, like, if it's sketchy, and I'm like, sure, but no, but for you, but that's cool,
of course,
Yeah. But when I put the words together, like, what it means to me is like, the tank and the crime of the tank is like unstoppable. So if you take it out of a war scenario, it's unstoppable. And so that was kind of like bravado, like hip hop kind of.
Yeah.
Like that's where that part came from. And then the punk half of it is a literal tank, and I'm anti-war. And so it was like the crusty punk, peace punk part of it is that all tanks are committing crimes. The bravado part was, we're in a fucking tank, get out of the way. We're committing crimes. We're not murdering people. We're doing whatever we want, and you can't stop us, you know? So, and that's kind of like my personality, because I come from a hip hop background, and I always liked that. And there's not a lot of places where, and, you know, even with the name Tankcrimes, I have to explain it to you for that, because there's not a lot of places where that kind of hip hop bravado works in punk. You know, there's a different attitude to punk. It might be a turn off. Everything a rapper would say, if you take out misogyny or whatever, but like that kind of I'm the best and stuff, and that competition. Punk bands don't really do that.
Like Death Row kind of thing.
Yeah. You know, I mean, even to the very beginning of battle rappers on the street corners and stuff like that, like it never really took off in punk to brag. Punk isn't really a bragging genre the way hip hop is and stuff. So it just kind of incorporated, and those are like pieces of my personality.
That's great.
Was there a moment or a particular album where you're like, yeah, we've turned the corner and this is a success?
I don't know when I felt like I didn't feel like real success, like as a record label in the broader music industry, until the last few years. And I feel like maybe post like 20, like the years I went to grow pot out in the woods, which is where I am now. My wife and I this is where I grew pot, and my wife and I ended up leasing this property off the guy I used to grow pot for, because he got out of the game when pot got legalized, because it wasn't worth any money. But then he took the money he had earned, and now it is legal. Like, does legal cannabis now. I got completely out of the game, but moved out here to pay off the label's debts, because I'd gone in a lot of debt because I was overexerting like, basically, I mean, I'm a super music fan. Like, that's how I do it, you know, or not how, but why, you know? So, but what happened was, every band that I loved and I got excited about and I liked the people, I was just putting out too many records. And then my ambition would be like, oh, we're going to do an album and all this stuff. So I just realized like I was fucking up by like maybe a band that could have like put out their own 307 inches because they were going to play locally, or maybe do some local cities. My ambition ended up being higher than some of the bands I was working with. And I was like, I made 1,000 CDs and 1,000 LPs and a PR campaign and an ad campaign. And I sunk all this money. And then a lot of bands, you know, especially in punk, and this is one of the things that's great about it, I have tons of friends that have no ambition to play guitar for a living. They like having Thursday night band practice with a 12-pack and some friends and get out of the house and go after work and play some shows when they come along. But my ambition had become, oh, I want to work with bands that are like touring all the time. And I want Tankcrimes to remain independent and just me, but I want to be like a force in the industry, even if it's just carving out this little thing. So when a lot of labels would have folded, I spent 3 years growing pot illegally and dug myself out of that hole, and then was able to start fresh. So I wasn't starting over. I was starting with all that experience, but it was a new, fresh line, a new take. But all the way back to, when did I feel like we were doing something? I kind of always did. I kind of always just believed in what I was doing and believed in the bands. And there's certain releases early on, like basically when we like started doing metal, our first metal release was Ghoul Splatter Thrash, which is now like a classic album of like 2000s thrash, you know, like it came right at the same time when Municipal Waste and Toxic Holocaust were kind of bringing thrash from, you know, the thrash metal bands of the 80s and 90s had gone dormant or gone rap or gone new metal. And these bands, I always say Toxic Waste or Toxic Holocaust and Municipal Waste kind of brought thrash back from the basement to the big stage, you know, and a lot of, you know, I don't, a lot of those bands, whether people saw it or not, you know, a lot of major thrash bands weren't doing shit in 2005.
Yeah.
And by the time 2010 rolls around, they're back on doing headlining tours and doing cool stuff and reforming and even writing new music and with new record deals and stuff, you know?
I remember all that.
So
That was like Warbringer and that whole
yeah,
thrash
there's
revival
new
thing was
bands.
happening.
So there's only, you know, there was a huge boom of like retro thrash bands.
Yeah.
And now there's a handful of them that made careers out of it, you know, and it brought a lot of bands back. And that was the first kind of like boom that I was a part of. And I've kind of rode Municipal Waste coattails for so long, just because I was along for the ride. You know, I've done every fucking job you can do besides play a fucking guitar for Municipal Waste since 2002. So, you know, I've been on basement tours with them. I've sold merch. I've roadied. I've driven the van. I've fucking stage managed. I've tour managed. I was Ryan Waste's guitar tech for 2 years. I don't play guitar. And he's a lefty and I'm a righty.
Okay.
So, you know, whatever the job calls for, I'll figure it out. But
yeah.
So that, and then actually while I was out here growing pot the second season, so the first season I was here was one of the slowest years of Tankcrimes because I almost had to shut down.
Wow.
Grew a couple hundred pounds of weed. We're in the clear. We're good. Paid off the pressing plant. I owed them tens of thousands of dollars. It was brutal. I was like, I need to go back to waiting tables and shit. Like, what's my another career going to be? I didn't plan on Tankcrimes being my career, but I was already in deep enough and had aged enough doing it. Like, years go by so fucking fast. I've been doing this now 1/2 of my entire life. I turned 46 in a couple days. Started the label when I was 23. Met Municipal Waste when I was 22. But the second year I was out here growing pot, Ghoul's last album, Dungeon Bastards, we didn't even fucking try. We tried, but we didn't know this was an option for us. Hit the Billboard fucking charts. A fucking one-man label operating out of the time, out of a fucking tent on a pot farm.
Oh my
God. I had cell phone service, but no internet. So I'd have to like put the hotspot on my phone. And this is when the hotspot like cost money to use. And so I'd turn on the hotspot on my phone, turn on the laptop real quick, fucking do whatever had to be done. And then like, I'd like try to like finish emails hella fast and like shut the laptop. Like, and so that really felt like, oh shit, like we're really doing stuff. And it was around that time I felt like I'd kind of like met more people in the larger like metal. I felt like we're a real metal label, not just a punk label. And I always like the one thing that runs through all the bands is punk, even the metal bands on the label, you know? And then it was like, boom, the very next summer after Dungeon Bastards. And this one was even more of a surprise because it was a debut album. Necrot's debut, Blood Offerings, boom, we're back on the Billboard charts.
Yeah.
That was fucking nuts. You know, like now we have goals. Like the new Ghoul that's coming out this Friday, or I don't know when this goes up, but what that comes out February 2nd.
Yeah.
I've already done enough pre-orders for us to hit the Billboard charts, and we'll see how many we sell the first week in stores. So that's really cool, but that was never a goal for the label. And honestly, it's funny because it's not that many records. The Billboard charts are a joke these days. People just aren't buying enough physical units. That's why a label like Tankcrimes is up there. But it gets you, you know, not that I was ever like, I always felt like the underdog, but it wasn't like I was like looking for respect from the industry. But then when I got it, it felt really good. And it was like, okay, I'm doing this. And there's certain things like that. Certainly when you're just running the label by yourself, where there's like, like I can tell my dad we're on the Billboard charts. Like my dad's always supported me doing the label. I kind of got my entrepreneurship from my dad. He owned a bar my whole life. And I also got my work ethic from my dad because I was a bad fucking kid. So I was washing dishes at my dad's bar when I was 12 years old. He's like, "Oh, I found the cigarettes in your jacket. Get to the bar. You're washing dishes now." And I started working when I was a kid, and I was always in trouble. So I always worked at my dad's I always worked at my dad's bar all through high school. And then I grew up in a small rural town. So I always just felt bigger than my town. So I moved to San Francisco when I was still like after I did graduate high school, but then I was in San Francisco shortly after when I was still a teenager. But
That reminds me, I wanted to ask you. So, all right, so we're from Baltimore. Baltimore's very close to DC, but Baltimore is much more blue collar than DC. And if you talk to
yes.
us, we will say we're not the same. We're different. They're the artistes. We're the workers. Is it like that with San Francisco and Oakland? Like, what's the dichotomy
As soon
there?
as you started saying that, I was like, that's Oakland and San Francisco feel that way.
I wasn't sure
Oakland
if
and
it was
San
true or
Francisco
not.
totally. Certainly past, when I first moved to San Francisco in 1998, that was when they called it, that's pretty early internet. And so they called it the .com boom.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
that was like, that was happening like right then. And then it bust, it's like a lot of like, it's crazy that like so many huge tech guys and stuff like, they get a lot of credit for like starting the internet as we know it now. But a lot of those guys, I read that like Mark Cuban got his first like $1 million because he bought like money.com or something. Like so many of these early tech guys just bought like a certain like domain name and then sold it to like Yahoo for $5 million or something,
Wow.
or whatever
Yeah.
other tech company came up and wanted to do it. So like, and then they stayed in tech and did really well. But a lot of that stuff started just from fucking when people were flipping out about domain names and like how much value was in that, and the stock market going crazy for companies that didn't even have a product,
Yeah.
So then we had the .com boom. So San Francisco and Silicon Valley like rocketed up in the late 90s and then crashed, So I stayed in San Francisco until 2004. And that was when like the .com boom was over and we just simply got priced out of the city. And then once I moved to Oakland, because I always like rode hard for San Francisco. It's a fucking beautiful place. It's so fucking cool, I didn't necessarily want to move to the East Bay. I liked being in San Francisco. But then I get to Oakland and I just get that East Bay vibe, like, yeah, fuck SF, fucking tech bullshit, tech bro bullshit. They're wrecking everything, all that shit, But it was true because there was, I mean, even by 2005, there wasn't really a lot of DIY spots for bands to play in SF, while Oakland and Richmond and Berkeley had fucking 10 warehouses where, it's funny what people ask what attracted me to this kind of music at first. And I'm like a party guy. I was like, oh, you could bring a 40 ounce into a show if you were a minor. DIY warehouses are fucking awesome. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I had that.
I was used to
record,
like getting kicked out of shows or pre-gaming, It was like
I had that record. Was it Eastern Front 3 live at Ruthie's Inn? That was a great one because it had like that was perfect because it had Raw Power, but it also had like Death Angel on it, and it was such a great punk and metal together, and it was really ahead of its time too.
Raw Power is actually a huge band for me. I love Raw Power out of Italy, and they were one of like the first because I wasn't a metalhead in the 90s. Like I just wasn't. That shit missed me. I was from a small town. Like I don't know, like the death metal boom of the 90s like didn't make it to my rural town, or we weren't paying attention. And then by the time I got like into punk, I don't know, like the metal I knew was like hair metal and MTV metal from being a kid, or the classic rock my dad listened to. So getting into metal in the East Bay, it was like, then I was all of a sudden could see metal bands playing in warehouses and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, I thought that like metal was like bloated and like, I don't like, I was kind of, a lot of punks had that attitude at the time and they might still now, like, oh, I'm kind of too cool for that because I don't go to a nightclub. I go to the warehouse or I go to the basement or the backyard party and stuff,
Right.
After I got involved in like touring and stuff, I realized that metal bands work just as hard as anyone and that touring on like a club circuit is actually way harder than touring in a basement circuit. You have a schedule. We used to
Yeah.
tour and like call. It's like we're like, sorry, we stopped and went shoe shopping. This was my with VoteSec. Like the girls would want to go shopping, and then we'd be like, sorry, we're like 2 hours late. Like, tell the first band to go on and ask if we can use their gear. And then you get into like the real touring circuit, and it's like load in at 1 p.m., sound check at 2:30. Like, and you're like, whoa, this is so fucking different, you know?
Right, right. Yeah. Well, talk a little bit about the brain squeeze because I'm sure that that developed from your love of municipal waste and
Yeah, Brain Squeeze was always a festival we did in Oakland. It was kind of a label showcase, and we'd have like some other friends bands or whatever. And I had another one booked for 2020 for the fall that we never got to announce, which was maybe easier than having to cancel it or refund or whatever. You know, I'm kind of glad we didn't have to go through that, but I was really looking forward to it. And I always wanted to do a tour, but it's really difficult, you know, operating at the level that Tankcrimes does, even with the biggest bands on the label. Like a lot of people are still working jobs in between gigs, you know, and it's like hard to get like it's hard enough to get one band to get like 5 people to all get the time off work or save up rent in advance or whatever you need to do. It's even harder when you need 8 people or 10 people or 12 people or 20 people, you know.
yeah.
So the way this Brain Squeeze tour coming up came out was it was just a municipal waste headlining tour that they were booking to celebrate. You know, it's the Waste Them All, their first album's 21st anniversary. And so, you know, and Waste usually does take out friends bands, or, you know, they're really good at giving like some smaller bands maybe like their first chance to play a bigger stage and kind of learn the ropes of professional touring more. And it was really important for them to have kind of long-term friends on this tour. And they had invited Necrot, and it just started like that. Like Necrot confirmed. Okay, cool. Necrot's going on tour with Waste. That was fucking awesome.
Yeah.
They hit up Ghoul. Ghoul confirms. And then after Ghoul confirmed, Tony from the Waste just called me and he goes, dude, I got Ghoul and I got Necrot. And I was like, oh, fuck, it's happening. And he was like, there was like this pause. And I was like, are we doing a fucking Brain Squeeze tour? And he goes, we're doing a Brain Squeeze tour. And I was like, yes,
That's awesome.
fuck yeah. Thanks, Tony. Thank you. You know, so it's like, it's cool because Brain Squeeze is like a name. Brain Squeeze is another name like Tankcrimes. Like it's a little more literal, easier to find out because you can. But it's like I took 2 words and made them 1 word, and it's like a feeling. You know, it's like what's a brain squeeze? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it scary? Is it happy? Is it fun? Is it sketchy? Is it fucking cool?
Is it like a brain freeze?
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. Like, is it a feeling? Is it an action? Do I participate in it? Do I watch it? Is it happening to me? Am I doing it? And so I don't think I would have been able to put together the tour without municipal waste. And then of course, you know, it's not like they were on the phone calling all the agents. So they have you know, one of the biggest metal bookers in North America, this guy named Nick Storch. So I got to give my hats off to him too, because he really did the heavy lifting. Tony and the Waste guys put it together. Nick Storch did all the heavy lifting, and so then I come in and do the marketing and promotion, which, you know, it's like a municipal waste tour. They've been so successful for so long, like all their shows are going to be packed anyways. So I'm really wanted to come in and just show, you know, which my guys know. I'm not like proving something to them, but I didn't want to let anyone down. I wanted to just really show get like the Tankcrimes hype machine behind the tour, that, you know, and show what I could really do. And we are doing tons of like extra stuff more than would have been done for this tour if it was just the municipal waste headliner, which would have been a great success on its own, no matter who came out with it, but made it this big family tour, and everyone's been friends for a really long time. And, you know, now we got Dead Heat opening up, and they came out on the very first tour. They've already been out with municipal waste, and that's how we met them. Tony was a fan and invited them out on a tour, but it was the very first tour after COVID. And so it was still 2021. It was still weird. Like people still weren't coming out. Yeah. There was shows where we had to show our fucking vaccine proof of purchase just to get into the club. And people were masked up, and some people felt weird about moshing or stage diving. And some clubs were weird about it too. And just, you know, we were still coming out of that fucking fog, and everyone was excited about getting back to normal, but nothing, you know how long it took. After it took a whole nother year before things were like it is now, like where everybody just actually felt normal, you know? So they came on a tour, and there was some awesome shows on that tour, but it was just kind of a weird vibe, you know? And there was a couple stinkers even too, just like just because, and we knew what we were doing. We knew we were having a tour. And there was even, fans on social media being like, sorry, I'm not ready, and like, we understood that. Or like, or I live with my mom and she's got pre-existing conditions. So it's just not cool for me to go out and party with a couple hundred people and come back home and, stuff like that. It was just, we were still like figuring out how to get back to normal. And so this was cool because it's kind of giving. Since then, I started working with Dead Heat because of the relationship we formed on that short 2-week tour. And now it's cool to give them a second chance to come out and really get the full, we're going out with Municipal Waste experience.
Yeah. That's great. I saw the punk metal thing we're talking about. Municipal Waste they fit into that so well. I saw them I remember when I bought the tickets. It was them, I Hate God, and Discharge. And I thought, are these three bands going to fit together? It was seamless. It was perfect,
Yeah.
So what a great lineup. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, that's kind of how we like the tour. I mean, surely like maybe somebody with doesn't have an ear for punk or metal. Everything sounds like noise or whatever. But I feel like we got a really good diverse tour because, Dead Heat, like they play Slayer riffs. But they're coming from the hardcore scene, like the sportswear capital H hardcore scene. That's where they're at. And they have a lot of like influences from New York hardcore, like Sick of It All, Agnostic Front influences in their song. But they're really, they're playing like traditional crossover, but they were playing mostly for a hardcore scene. So I think it's going to be really cool to see them play in front of 1,000 people who are really there to see Municipal Waste, who are a fucking tried and true thrash metal band,
So we used to call that that's the Jeff Hanneman 5 Beers In playlist is what that is. That's
I
fucking,
love it.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. It's all hardcore, Minor Threat, shit like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And then you go in right into Necrot, who are playing a pretty traditional old school death metal, and then into Ghoul, who's bringing the whole fucking stage show with the monsters and the robots and the blood and the murder and the death and all the fun stuff that comes with that. And then everyone knows Municipal Waste was one of the best live bands out there. You don't have to own a Municipal Waste record to have a great time watching those guys perform.
Yeah, we interviewed I think it was Cremator from Ghoul.
Yeah.
Cremator, the bass player. Cremator. And
oh, sweet. Yeah.
We were in hoods.
We did.
So when the Zoom call came up.
Oh, I heard about that. That was with you guys. Oh, that's awesome.
He was like totally freaked out. He was like,
you guys are fun. That's great.
Well, we go way back with Ghoul. Absolutely. Yeah, I saw them at Maryland Death Fest a bunch of times. Yeah. So great band. Yeah.
I want to say also, I like your guys' dynamic. And I kind of I've been on like this press tour, man. I've been doing so much fucking interviews, which is super fun. And I like doing. I like this vibe. I like the dynamic with the two hosts because you guys have this chemistry and then we're vibing and we can go back and forth. This would be I probably did 10 interviews this week. And this is my first one with 2 people.
It's funny when you were talking about how when you have a lot of product, but you don't know how to market it. It took me back to when I used to run the website because we would ask a label for just one and they would send like a box of like everything. And automatically I was like, all right, they don't have a marketing department. This is it. This is when we emailed them, it was the greatest thing that ever happened.
And then it's
we could tell on our end,
Yeah, well, you have to like learn how to focus too, because like if somebody shows interest, like nothing better than somebody, like my whole job is promoting my music. So nothing better, like you guys calling are like, will you talk to us? I'm like, oh, great. Someone's going to help me.
Right.
You need help. And you've been doing this for so long, but if it's a sign that you haven't figured it out yet, because it's like, I don't want to overwhelm you. You're like, oh, I'm interested in what you're doing. It's like, okay, here's 20 CDs.
Yeah.
Like, well, fuck, then what do you do?
Yeah, we would get
there needs to be a focus or you're going to overwhelm the person who's trying to help you. And then it can get, I'm doing this street team thing right now with the Brain Squeeze. And I've been sending out posters and just getting people to help me put them up in local towns and in their towns and stuff like that. And I've just been sending them like stickers and posters and buttons and just cool stuff. You got to be a fan to want to help me out and do this. But some people are like, oh, dude, I can do 150 posters easy. And I'm like, no, you can't. There is nothing easy about handling 150 posters. I know because I do 100 posters for every Tankcrimes shows in the Bay. And that shit'll take me a full day or 2 days to do. And I do that because I care that much. but no one who's volunteering for stickers is gonna no problem do 100. Somebody told me no problem 500 posters, and I was like, first of
Wow.
all, that's how many posters I made for the whole tour. But
Right. You and
also,
one
like,
army. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like you're not gonna do that. And so I've been sending people like 15 posters, and that's
Mhm.
really good. And but I also don't want to overwhelm someone, because sometimes you get too much. Back to what we were saying, you get too much and you get overwhelmed. If I sent someone 100 posters, they'd be like, oh, fuck, I'm stressed out. Told Scotty I was going to do 100 posters, man. I didn't think it was going to take fucking, you know, 2 days to do it, or 15
Right.
hours or whatever. And so I want there to be like no barriers of procrastination.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, if I sent you 15 posters, that feels easy. Throw them in the front
Yeah.
seat of your car. Throw them in your bike basket. Throw
Well,
them
it's
in
the
your
same.
fucking
It's the
backpack.
same thing with it's the same thing with bands. Like back when I did the website and now there are some bands that will like their music's like but their promotion is just like bam, 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 and we back off that because it's about quality for us. But then
Yeah.
on the other hand, we will bug the crap out of a band that we like, and they'll be like, we're having dinner now, so could you call another time? I mean, you just never know what you're going to get with some of these bands. Like we want to shout it from the rooftops. And like, yeah, well, we're a little busy right now. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the worst feeling when you love a band and they're
Or
obscure.
or
But
they
then you say to yourself, some bands are obscure for a reason.
or
They
they just
just they
say
want to be.
we don't want to
Yeah. They
do
want, like
interviews.
I said, yeah, some
Yeah,
bands like that, and other bands, yeah, like you
yeah,
said, you got to get the songs down if you want to be overly ambitious. But
right.
then there's a sweet, I mean, I'm always just looking for that sweet spot.
Yeah,
Like somebody who's got, maybe they're not writing the best song ever, but they got a song that the riff I can hum along, I can hum
yeah, yeah.
along, or if I see them live,
Right,
I'll maybe have a track, one of the hooks caught in my head the next day. I'm always looking for stuff like that. And maybe they don't want to be the next biggest thing ever, but maybe they would be, they have enough ambition that it'd be cool if they got a free guitar one day or got to go
yeah. I
on a
mean,
big
you put
package tour,
you put
you
effort
know?
into right. You put effort into this music. I mean, we're trying to help you promote it. Hello, it's like, come
Yeah.
on, It's not the front of Rolling Stone or anything, but come on, give me a
Yeah.
break.
Well, a lot of what I do as a label, and one of the reasons I like to have a really small roster, is because I like to give everybody that extra attention. And what I do with my bands is a lot of what a manager would do. So I kind of play both, because like if you're on like a super big label with like 100 releases a year, you kind of need a manager just to talk to your label. Especially if you're a new band, you might realize you might want things from your label, but not even know how to ask or know that you can ask if you're on this massive label. And so a manager will really help a band cut through the noise on a bigger label and get you more stuff. And I just try to do a lot of the stuff I do are those I can play both roles and save my band some money, because they don't really need a manager at that level, especially if the label is there's so much open dialogue with the label, so we can discuss like what are your guys' needs or what are your guys' expectations, and then I can
Right.
go back and say, well, these are my expectations, so if we're on the same page, we have a deal. And if we're not, it's just not a right fit. And that's what else is cool about working with friends, because I have some friends that had been on the label, and it's like now they kind of know, like, oh yeah, like Scotty's kind of moved up. And that's, like I said, like I have friends with bands that just want to have, band practice once a week to blow off some steam, have a good time. They do have these great songs inside them and they want to get them out and they want to do all this stuff, but they don't really need international distribution and marketing and publicity and all the things that
Right.
they don't need a booking agent, because they're going to play 10 shows in a year or less, not 100.
Yeah.
But now, just because as the label's grown, like that's what excites me. Like I've been doing it for so long, I need stuff that keeps me interested. So now working with a band like Necrot, who's going to play over 100 shows this year, I'm like, sweet, I don't put out another record. We'll fucking finish the tour, put out your guys' new record, and I'll work on it all fucking year. If you guys are going to play 100 shows, I don't need to move on until you guys are. Let's do this. Let's spend the whole, and that was Necrot's last album was the fastest and biggest selling record ever on Tankcrimes. And they had to cancel 100 shows. We figured out how to take advantage of there being a lot of space for us it during the pandemic where there was no coverage of any live shows because there wasn't any, and a lot of the bigger bands shelved their record because they didn't want to do it without touring. So we found this little sweet spot, and we figured out how to work it, you know. But that was the same thing. Like even before the pandemic hit, I already had a plan to do one record in 2020, and that was Necrot's record. And so now we're kind of getting up, you know, we had such great sales and everything and promotion with that record, but they didn't end up playing the show for another couple years because they had a bunch of like, once the world kind of reopened, there was a series of like trials and tribulations that Necrot will talk about when they start promoting their album. But it took them another, you know, they're just getting like back to work now. And I've already been on like 6 tours, you know? Right. So shit like that happens, but not every label can just be like, all right, cool. Yeah, let's do one record this year. But if I have one record that can sell 10,000 LPs, that's fucking way easier than 10 records that sell 1,000, you know? And it's more fun because we're so involved. And now like me and the guys in Necrot, like, I mean, we're just involved in each other's daily lives. You know, they really make me feel like the fourth member of the band, you know?
Well, if you're like the kind of the semi-manager, have you had any of those calls where it's like, well, maybe she really did need to water her plants, you know, maybe you shouldn't take it so personally. Have you had any of those type of calls with people? You know?
Well, you know, because we're all friends, there's stuff on friendship level like that does get taken care of, but I don't consider that part of the label's job. I consider that me. Well,
you said manager, so that's
buddy.
That's what
yeah,
to me,
yeah,
that's what managers do. Managers say, well, you know, maybe she really did have to go because her mom was on the other line. Maybe you shouldn't take it so personally, you know, like almost like the Spinal Tap type thing. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and over the course of your career, have you ever either had a band that you thought was really going to go places that went nowhere, or the other way around where you were like, this is horrible, and yet they really had achieved success?
There's a couple bands that I wish were like that I worked with. There was this band Population Reduction, and actually Benny.
I was going to ask you about them.
He ended up playing.
I literally have on the sheet. Whatever happened to Population Reduction is on my.
I'll tell you, I ended up poaching them for my band, and then Benny ended up playing guitar in Votesec, and then Ghoul fucking stole them from us. So I'll break fucking kayfabe.
See, I know you guys
did a full cremator. I know you guys did a full cremator in character. I'll break kayfabe. Benny from Population Reduction is the second dissector.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
So
I love that
he's
band.
doing now.
They did that split with was it not?
They just split with Abscess, and they did
that's right with Abscess.
Yeah. And that was cool.
It seemed like they really.
That's how I met Chris Reifert from Autopsy, and we've been great friends ever since. And he's been super helpful to my band.
Chris Reifert from Death. From Death.
Yeah, from Death. Yeah, you know, from all. And it was cool. I don't think Chris considers Death his band, but we know he was in that.
But
band
I love
too,
the albums with him on them. That's my Death.
Yeah, no, he's incredible. So we did that, and so I feel like if where the label's at now as kind of like part of the metal scene and part of like the decibel scene and stuff like that, I feel like if Population's album was like being delivered to me right now and we were doing it next year and they had the excitement of a couple guys in their 20s that want to fucking go out and fucking take over the world with their fucking grindcore death metal, I think what the music they produced was good enough. And if we could have put them out on the road and they were on a label like where Tankcrimes is now, not where we were when we put it out 15 years ago, I think they could have sustained success. You know, got booked on Maryland Death Fest and maybe got out on a package tour, and we could have sold way more records than we did, you know?
Yeah.
Then there was this band from Wisconsin called Dios Mio, like a hardcore band, and they were kind of like if Municipal Waste was like a 90s Epitaph band or something, you know? They kind of reminded me like if Municipal Waste like spawned with Pennywise or something, you know? And they had that really fun party attitude, but they were doing like professional songs. A lot of that, like when I come up with the Epitaph stuff, a lot of that comes down to just like the way a band played its kick drum or recorded its guitars too, you know? But like when I met them, they were making their own music videos and they were super creative guys, and they were making like totally professional music videos and stuff and doing really cool stuff. And I thought they were fucking awesome. And I always felt like they could have just been fucking huge. But you know what? They were just some kids in college doing it in the summers. You know, it happened with like a lot of bands. You know, they got to tour twice and they got to put out a couple records. And I think maybe one of the guys got a real job and then another guy knocked up his girlfriend. And just life goes on, you know.
Rock and
Not
roll.
every band is supposed to be a career, but a
It's
lot
funny
of
you bring
great
up-
bands had a great few summers, you know, and Dios Mio is
funny-
one of those bands. And they never get talked about.
You bring up Epitaph. I remember when Converge got signed to Epitaph, I had to interview Jake Bannon. And I remember the interview, I was like, are you guys going to turn to Dropkick Murphys now? Like,
yeah,
is it
because that was
over?
kind of past, that was kind of post the Epitaph sound.
Right.
You
And
know,
I
they're
was
like,
just
oh,
like
now
scared to
they're
death.
just-
I was like, is it over? Are we done? I mean, yeah.
Yeah. But that was kind of, yeah, when Converge signs and stuff like that, and they were doing some fucking rappy shit too. It was like,
Right.
oh, they don't have a sound anymore. Like a record label has to keep going on after the scene they spawn from moves on.
Yeah.
So that, you know, when you're right, when I say Epitaph sound, I'm talking about 1994 to 1998, you know, like the early
I know
Warped
exactly what
Tour
you mean.
Epitaph.
I was scared to
stuff.
death. I was like, Converge is doomed. They're on Epitaph. It's over, you know.
Yep.
But it, you know, they were,
And then they're like, actually, they're like one of the greatest independent labels to be
right,
on.
right.
You
Well,
know,
you said,
and so it
you
like
said,
really helped them move their career ahead.
You said Havoc. My God, how many great fucking releases did they have? They just
Havoc's my
cranked
favorite.
them.
Havoc's my favorite. You know, what a great catalog. And getting into Havoc was like a fucking gateway drug for crust in traditional, you know, punk of the 2000s and even, you know, like kind of the rebirth of fast hardcore that happened in the early 2000s, which is really like what Deadfall was trying to do, and the early Tankcrimes bands were trying to emulate that, or that's kind of the scene we spawned out of and stuff. And I love Felix Havoc and I love Havoc Records. And it's cool because he still kind of does it on the side or whatever. You know, he's like a journeyman carpenter. Like he is absolutely fucking an amazing skill. He's sponsored.
I didn't know that. Wow.
He's sponsored by a saw.
That's so awesome.
Like, I don't know shit about that.
You got to get that for Ghoul. That'd be perfect.
Yeah, right. I know exactly. Ghoul and Exhumed should get a saw sponsor. They need to hit up Felix.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. Felix is this incredible journeyman carpenter now, and he still does the hobby as a, you know, he just put out the new Pissed record, but it's like a split between like 5 labels and stuff. So it's definitely, you know, not the full-time stuff. Because I was really inspired by Felix because he had his record distro and then he would drive his bands on tour and sell records the whole time. So like, you knew if a Havoc band was coming on tour, you also needed to bring extra money because Havoc was about to bust out fucking 7 boxes of 7-inches that you could dig through. And that's back when a 7-inch cost $3. So it's like any Havoc band would come out.
Their catalog is
bring a fucking $20 bill to that fucking show and I'm going home with fucking 6 new records, maybe 7.
Yeah. It's funny you were talking about the Tool. I remember you know that first Accept album with it's got the chick on the cover with the chainsaw?
Yeah.
It's got like, we used to laugh about this. Used to be like, this album sucks. It's got like 4 ballads, but where the hell did she get that chainsaw? That thing is awesome. You can't buy that at Home Depot. That is a commercial grade fucking chainsaw. Yeah.
I actually, now that I live out here, you know, I was going to say, I learned how to like, this shed behind me, my barn, that's Tankcrimes label headquarters. And that was just a broken down barn. And I learned how to fucking finish the drywall on YouTube and stuff like that. Like I just, to turn it into the thing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's funny about the chainsaw is that I have all electric tools and like some of my neighbors are pretty country and they like laugh at me for like not having like diesel powered chainsaws and shit. Yeah, it's just so funny.
Because you're not like Paul Bunyan cutting down.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, I'm like trimming some trees out here, dude. I'm not trying to like fucking, you know, and I just like not having to have fucking gas cans around the house. We live in a fucking fire zone. I don't need like just like cans of unleaded and fucking chain oil, like just funny. Like all around the property or whatever. But like, it is funny.
Get a load of this guy with his Ryobi tool.
Oh, exactly. I know my country ass neighbor like rolls his eyes when he hears my little Ryobi's turning on, ying, 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 and he's over there starting up basically a fucking, his has a fucking dirt bike engine on it. You know, it's like, I actually don't know if they're, because we're on 10 acres, so I can't see my neighbors, but I can hear them. And I sometimes don't know if he's cutting trees or riding his dirt bike because like they have the same engine.
You're like, I'm not building a log cabin here. Okay. I just am trimming. Yeah, exactly. So
I'm new school. I'm new country, dude. I'm not old country.
All right, so we play a game on the show.
Dun, 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 dun.
Let's I think you'll like this game. The game's called Blaspheming Monikers, okay?
Okay.
And it's a metal game. So there are 5 band names in front of me from the metal archives. One of them I have made up. So I'm going to read them to you and I want
Oh,
you to
this is
guess
fun. Okay.
which one is not a real band, okay? Okay. First, Trample the Cross. Second, Steel Cross. Third, Lorraine Cross. Fourth, Cross Examination. And fifth, Crossed Streams.
The second one's the fake one.
Wow, that was great. Yeah, absolutely right.
Did I get it?
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah,
Wow,
motherfucker. I listen. Well, first
how
of
did
all,
you get that so easily?
I have cross-examination records, so I knew
Okay.
that. The one that
Okay.
was the woman's name didn't
Lorraine
seem like
Cross.
one. It didn't. That just didn't seem like one that you would make up like that.
Yeah, they're
you
from
know?
France. They're
So
from
I
France.
believe that sounded like a band. And the first one, I actually worked with a band called Deny the Cross.
All right, that's an
and
Overkill song. Yeah, okay.
which
Yeah.
is named after an Overkill song.
Right, Trample the
And
Cross. Okay.
so Trample the Cross, I just thought like that, like I've not heard that band, but that definitely felt like a band. Plus, I've done so many fucking tours, so a lot of those band names, like no offense to local bands, but sometimes you just know a band's just like a local
Congratulations.
band by what their
That-
name is.
You
know,
may have done better on this. I think you did better than anyone ever has. No one's ever done that
yes.
good that fast. How about explain Crossed Streams? They're in Ontario. There's no Ghostbusters references and they're black metal. I mean, where are they getting Cross Streams from?
Oh, see, that's interesting because I definitely just thought that was definitely a local band that could be a thrash band that was like Ghostbusters sci-fi themed thrash.
No,
band.
they're not. They're not.
And they're not.
That's what I thought
but
too.
that's what made them a real band to me because I got the reference right away, even though apparently it's the wrong reference.
I think,
but like
I think
that reference like worked.
I think you just have you've seen a lot of really bad band names. I think that's why you knew it so well.
Even more. I've spent so much time in the backstage room at fucking dive bars in clubs all over this fucking world. I even did this thing one time where I was like, sometimes, you know, it's like you'll be in this backstage and there's 500 stickers on the wall and you're like, you know, of course we're going to put our band sticker up there. And I'll go, wait, guys, I don't know, man. I've not heard of one of these bands. Perhaps it's a fucking curse to put your sticker on this wall.
This is the wall of doom.
500 bands I've never heard of played this fucking club.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't even be
let's
here. We should maybe just fucking get in the van and leave. This is bad fucking news, you know?
No, that was great. Yeah, you looked right into my soul on that one. That was perfect. Yeah.
We had Solomon from Night Fever on.
Yeah, Night Fever. Remember them?
I worked with them. That's the
only
I mean,
band... I discovered them through you. Yeah.
That's the only Tankcrimes band that I never met.
Oh.
Because
we did a show, we interviewed him. They're
well, I know they're back. Yeah, I know they're back. They got a new album. Yeah. I didn't even know they were still a band because that's the one band in my catalog that I didn't know personally. And I did it with as a split release with Brandon, the old Waste drummer who did No Way Records, and RIP, he passed away. But we did that together. And my girlfriend at the time loved Night Fever. And the first time I heard Night Fever, Andy Horn from Cannabis Corpse played it for me in the van when we were doing an early Cannabis Corpse tour. Okay. And then they needed help because they were coming to the US and they didn't come to the West Coast. They went to the East Coast. But I like to work with all friends, but that was like a series of coincidences. I was like, this is a hardcore band a metal friend played for me. Yeah. My girlfriend at the time thought they were the best. One of my best friends, Brandon, wants help putting out the release. It was like all these things like came together.
I think that's my favorite. I think that's my favorite Tankcrimes release is their Transparent EP. I mean,
oh wow!
And when we interviewed him, the song that I like the most is the one that he just called Untitled on that EP.
Oh, I love that.
I asked him. I said, "Why is it untitled?" And he goes, "We just ran out of time." And I don't understand that answer because I was like, "You did the guitars, you did the drums, you did the lyrics, but you just didn't." It was like Untitled. Okay. Yeah. So.
I always thought because they were a hardcore band, I always like that Untitled too, because there's one of my favorite Negative Approach songs is just called Lead Song because it's the only one that has a guitar lead.
Is that on
And so
Tied Down? I think it's
yeah,
is that on,
yeah,
yeah.
and so it has this guitar lead, and so they just named it the lead song. It has nothing to do with the
Song
lyrics.
one.
Yeah. So great. I love chatting with you guys, man. I hope we
Yeah.
run into each other someday.
This is the Snaggletooth Extreme Metal Podcast.